Hey everyone, and welcome to a full day about the new Microsoft Fabric. Today in the room, I have Lars Andersen from Microsoft, Senior Program Manager at the CAT team, who will explore a little bit more about one of the specific topics of Microsoft Fabric. But for any new viewers out there, I'll just add a few words about what is Microsoft Fabric as a whole. So Microsoft Fabric is the newest product launch as software as a service solution from Microsoft for handling the entire data stack. Not just reporting and dataset data modeling, but the whole end-to-end data stack, everything from data ingestion through transformation, through storage, and data science, machine learning, real-time, and of course the data modeling and reporting as we know it. So in Microsoft Fabric, we have expanded our toolbox with a bunch of new tools. Some of them are not directly the Power BI tools we know, but they're bundling together in a unified platform, and they work really well together with Power BI. We have now a total of 6 experiences with all different areas where we can do everything from data engineering, data science, data integration, to doing the reporting we already know and love. And in Power BI, and that's why we invited you to the session here today, we also have some new things, and especially one feature comes to mind here. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes.
And glad to have you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Matthias. Yeah, so what I will be talking about here today is this new feature in Microsoft Fabric and in Power BI specifically that we call DirectLake. So I will go through some slides that sets what the scene, what it is, and then I will do a demo of how to work with it. But before I get started, as Matthias said, I'm Lars Andersen from Microsoft. I work in the I should probably say formally Power BI CAT team, because eventually we will be renamed Fabric CAT team, where I work with customers in Europe, specifically in Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, and Spain and Italy. So that's what I do on a daily basis. And I've been with Microsoft for more than 9 years, so I've been on the whole Power BI journey. So we have been very excited about what we launched at Build on Tuesday. So it's great that we can finally talk publicly about this and see how all you as customers look at this and start using it. So let me take you through a little presentation here where we talk about this DirectLake and what it's about. So what Matthias just showed in his slide, very, very brief, what Fabric is. One of the ideas behind Fabric is that it's one lake, so we should only have data in one place. We should not duplicate data, and we should have this one lake, one data lake, and that's the foundation in Fabric, and you don't have to think about creating this one lake. That's done for you automatically. So with DirectLake, it's going to use this Delta Lake Parquet format for all the artifacts in one lake, and they can actually be reused in a Power BI dataset without having to move your data from your source into a Power BI dataset. So again, a few slides here to show you. This is how it has been until Tuesday this week. So we have had basically 2 modes in Power BI datasets. We have had the direct query mode, where everything was still residing in the underlying data source. And whenever you had a visual in Power BI, then this visual was querying the underlying data source, and then the underlying data source would send the result back. It works, and it still works, and it supports very large volumes of data. Then we also have import mode, which is the preferred mode of working with Power BI, because that is where we take data from the source and actually import it into a Power BI dataset, so you get low latency and very, very fast. But in those scenarios, you actually have to move data into Power BI. So what we have done with DirectLake is that this slide here says it's the perfect mode. So DirectLake mode is about having your Parquet files, and then they will be the source. So we're just scanning the Parquet files. We're not moving the files into another storage layer. If we look at that on another way here, So these storage modes that we have today, direct query and import, for small data sets, direct query, there's always the question about the query speed with direct query because we are 100% depending on the underlying data source. But we don't need to import data, and the model size is unlimited when it comes to the Power BI model size. For smaller models, imported models works great. But when we grow to larger models, maybe hard to see in this slide, but the smiling faces for time to import and model size is not smiling a lot here for large modes because it can take a long time to refresh your data set, and there's a limitation on how much data you can actually have in memory in Power BI. So if we go to the DirectLake mode instead, then we are happier because it still works great for smaller data sets. And for larger data sets, it's also great because we don't have to spend time importing data set, and we can actually at least eventually have model sizes that are bigger than you can with import today. So an overview of this architecture in maybe a little funny looking overview here. It's not an architecture, but this is basically the way Fabric is working. We have our one lake in the middle, our Delta Lake with Parquet files, and then they can be queried and modified using different languages and different technologies. So what we will be looking at today specifically in this session about DirectLake is using a pipeline to take data from a source and load it into our Lakehouse, and then we will use Power BI to query those files, which basically is delta tables in our Lakehouse. What you will notice here as well is this concept that we call fallback mode, and I'll come back to that in a second. So why do we want to use Parquet? This is the new, let's say, standard in Fabric. Everything is Parquet files, and most of you who are listening here probably knows all about it, but let's just take a very quick recap of it. So it's open source, it's open data format. So you can take your file, move it from Microsoft technology to somewhere else. I mean, we want to make it open, and we want to make sure that you can actually use a technology that works. It's a column-oriented file format, and it's very efficient for data storage and actually retrieving the data as well. So if you've been in the industry for a long time, you know XML, JSON, and stuff like that. It works great, or CSV files, but it's not always great for querying, and that is where Parquet also is a great asset. We can also do efficient compression, and we'll see in a slide in a second how the compression actually done when we talk about Fabric, because we're doing something special in here. And then, as you saw in the previous slide, you can work with your Parquet files using whatever language you choose, basically. And finally, it's a common data storage format for a lot of the solutions out there, for Microsoft technology, for Databricks, for Snowflake, and other technologies. So a lot of people are already used to working with Parquet files, and now we want to make it the core of Fabric and the way you should be working with data going forward. So talking about this compression, this is an example we have with Microsoft sales data. It's 162 tables, and if we have that in a CSV file, it's 880 gigabytes, which is a decent size.
Yes.
And what we do, if we just load that into Parquet files, let's say a standard Parquet file, then we actually reduce the volume to 268 gigabytes, which is that's significant.
Yeah.
But what we do in Fabric is we use this V-order compression, which compresses the files even further. So going from these 268 gigabytes to the V-order compressed, this example actually takes it down to 84 gigabytes. So that's a 3.2 factor compression, and that means, of course, less I/O and faster querying, and that is the whole magic about making this DirectLake work as fast as import mode. So So this is what you will be doing, and a lot of this V-order compression is actually done automatically when you work with Lakehouse in Fabric. So the direct lake mode, when we work with it, and you'll see in a second how we create a direct lake dataset. But initially, we have a dataset that is empty. So if you have an imported dataset in Power BI, it has, let's say it's a 10 gigabyte dataset, then it takes up 10 gigabytes of memory when you load it into memory. A direct lake mode dataset has zero memory because there's no data in there. So whenever you start querying your dataset, then it will actually load the columns that are in your report, in your visualizations, into memory as you request them, basically. So they're being loaded from these Parquet files on, let's call it on demand. Then if we have columns in memory that is not being used for a while, then Fabric will automatically evict these datasets, which means that it will actually remove those datasets or those columns from memory, so it frees up memory for new columns that are being queried. And then, as I mentioned in that overview slide, we have this concept of fallback. So there can be cases where DirectLake does not support your in-memory, and there are different reasons for that. It's not documented right now, and I don't have all the details when it's going to happen. But for instance, if your column size is too large to fit into memory, well, what do we do then? I mean, then we will fall back to SQL, to direct query. So instead of querying the Parquet files directly, then we're using the SQL endpoint in Fabric, and then we are querying the same data and the same files, but using another technology. So of course, it will be a little slower.
That's nothing short of amazing. I mean, the way I see it today or a week ago, if we wanted to do just something close to this, we would have to include a mix of direct query and import in a composite model. We would have to configure aggregate tables. Yes. And even then, it sounds like this can do all that out of the box and more.
Yes. So that's the whole idea. And it is great. And I mean, we are very excited about this. Yes. Remember, we just launched it in public preview 2 days ago. It's still not 100% compatible with an imported model, but we will get there.
I have goosebumps. No, literally.
So, looking at this fallback on a visual representation here is that in the upper left-hand corner here, we have our Power BI dataset that is sending DAX or MDX to the dataset. And the first question the dataset has to answer is, are this a fallback to direct query against our SQL endpoint that is querying the Delta Lake, or can we do the direct lake? And hopefully in most cases, you'll be able to do direct lake so that you get the amazing fast performance, but in some cases, it will fall back to direct query. So everything will happen as needed. So what it says here, on-demand transcoding as needed, then is this transcoding that is the on-demand loading of your Delta files into memory in Power BI. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go into details about licensing because we don't have all the details available publicly yet, but you will still need some capacity to handle all this memory because we need to load it into memory. So it's not like you can just do everything with a very, very small capacity. If you have large data sets, you will still need a large capacity that can handle that workload. Yeah. So,
and I just want to mention that in 45 minutes, we will have the last sessions of today, which will also cover what we do know about capacity and pricing, which, as you say, is definitely not all of it, but we know something about what are the capacity sizes and so forth. We will cover that later. But definitely, this is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I have some questions here. Yes. We can take them later.
Yeah, let's take them.
People talking about how will this change the DAX we're writing, and will it change the DAX we're writing? And maybe we don't know the answer for this yet.
It will not change the DAX. It's still a Power BI dataset. So when we look at the demo in a second, when you go into the service, you still have a Power BI dataset. Now it's a direct lake mode. It's not direct query. It's not import. It's it's direct lake. So it's the same.
Cool. Interesting.
But of course, I mean, to go to this new mode of storage is not something you can just do by clicking 3 times and then you're ready to go. So it is a new architecture, and you will need to redo some of your existing data architecture. But this is something you should definitely think about for new projects. And if you have some models today where you are, let's say, limited in size and stuff like that, then this could also be a way to go. I mean, as hopefully everyone knows, what we have been saying for a lot of years, actually, at least I think in 2019, I think we had the first blog post where we said that Power BI Datasets, that will be the superset of analysis services.
Yep.
And in 2019, it was a great blog post, but we were not there technology-wise. Today we are. So if you're starting a new project, well, then you should always consider as your starting point to do it as a Power BI premium dataset, and then maybe look at Azure Analysis Services as your second option if that doesn't work. And this will hopefully just make it the choice easier.
Cool. So for anyone out there who may be worried about what they built a week ago, will that still continue to work unchanged, and they don't have to do anything? And so going forward, yeah. So we get questions on a regular basis about Azure Analysis Services. Are we going to deprecate Azure Analysis Services? And there's no plan to deprecate Azure Analysis Services. At some point, we may want to deprecate it, but you can continue to use it for many years going forward. We will not invest in new features for Azure Analysis Services. Everything we launch for new stuff is in Power BI, but you can still continue to use what you have. And I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Exactly. That's good.
Yeah.
And a relief.
Do you have more questions now,
nope,
or should we
continue
continue here? Good. So the last slide I have here is a link to the documentation that explains what DirectLake is. So let me go to my demo environment here. So now I want to show you how you from scratch can actually build a dataset using DirectLake mode. So I have a workspace here in my my Fabric environment, and one of the new things with Fabric is that in the lower left-hand corner here, we now have this selector of which experience do you want to be in. So I'm in my Power BI experience now, which means that when I click New, then I see Power BI objects. If I go to my data engineering experience, then I see something new here, and then I can go into workspace, and then I see my data engineering objects in here or elements. So this is a new, if you are in whatever experience you're in and you want to create something else, you can always click on show all, and then you will see all the experiences that you have access to. So the first thing that I need to do in order to create a DirectLake dataset is that I need to create a Lakehouse and load my data into to the Lakehouse, which is in these Delta tables. That is the foundation for my
create a Lakehouse. That sounded like something that would be a 6-month project.
Yeah. So it's let's see how long time we can time it. It may be a 6-second project. So you click on this Lakehouse, and then you give it a name. So we will call this FellowMind, and click Create. And then it's creating your Lakehouse in the Fabric environment. So now we have our Lakehouse. It's an empty Lakehouse, so it's not fun, but we have our Lakehouse. And on the Lakehouse right now, as I said, it's empty. We can see the list of our tables and list of files. Right now, we don't have any data in here. So what we want to do initially, we want to load some data. And we can do that using the next generation of data flows Gen 2. We could use a pipeline that you may know from Synapse pipelines or Azure Data Factory. You can create a notebook if you would like to do some PySpark or something to generate your data. Or you could create a shortcut to something else. even to something in AWS or something.
Nice.
So
I like how those buttons are right there when you where you need them.
Exactly. So what we want to do is that we, in this example, I have my data in an Azure SQL database. So I could use data flows, but the most enterprise way of doing it would probably be to use a data pipeline. So I click on data pipeline, and I have to give it a name. I'll just keep my default, and then I click create. So now I will create a new pipeline. And what you may know that we launched in Power BI not too long ago is this multi experience that I'll show you that in a second, so I can easily change between my pipeline and my Lakehouse. So when you launch this initially, since I told my Lakehouse that I want to copy the data, then I go into this copy data experience, and now it's started from the Lakehouse. So I'm kind of telling it that I actually want to copy the data into my Lakehouse. That's why it says. But you could also use a pipeline to copy data to another database or whatever you want to do.
Yep.
And we have made it easy for you. So if you don't have any data yourself, then you can actually start by using some sample data. And you can see here that we do have these New York taxi data, which you've probably seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a 2 gigabyte Parquet file. So that's a decent size. I'm not going to use that large data set for this demo, but I'm going to go in here under Azure and Azure SQL database. And I've already used my database before, so I have a connection I can reuse. So this is my Azure SQL database. So it has all the credentials and everything in place. So I don't need to create it more than once. So I click Next. And when I click Next here, then I'm connecting to my database, and now I can select the tables that I want to use. And I will select a few tables in here. I will select customer dimension, date dimension, product dimension, and a fact table. And I click Next. And in the next here, this pipeline asks me what should my data destination be. And again, since I launched it from the Lakehouse, it will by default select the Lakehouse that I launched it from. I could create a new Lakehouse, select another Lakehouse if I had another one, but this is what I want to do.
Nice and easy. Yeah,
so
we're already
change.
in there.
Yeah.
Of course, that's where we want to send it.
So next, I click Next, and then I selected 4 tables in my database, and then I have to select what is my data destination here. So will I load it into tables, Delta tables, or will I load it into files? And I want to use the Delta table because that is the foundation for my DirectLake, as we talked about.
Yep.
And what I can do on each table here is I can choose an action to append. So append the data every time I load, or I can choose to override. I'll just keep the default for now. And I can do that for each table. Then I click Next, and then I get a summary of what I've done, and then I click OK. So now I created this pipeline that is going to load data from my Azure SQL database into my Lakehouse. We don't want to spend time waiting for this data to load. It's not taking a long time, but for the sake of time, it's not very interesting to look at a clock ticking. So I have another workspace here where I already created a Lakehouse with data.
Yeah.
And I can click on, you can see here, when I create a Lakehouse, I get 3 elements or 3 artifacts here in Fabric. The bottom one here is my pipeline, so that's not created with my Lakehouse. But I get the Lakehouse itself, which is my files. Then I get my SQL endpoint, and then I get a default dataset. The default datasets can be used, but it's good practice, at least today, to create your own. Whether this default dataset will keep there or we will remove it at some point, I don't know. But if you want to make sure that the DirectLake is working, then you will need to create your own. But I can click on, it has the same name. So this one is called Lakehouse with data. When I click on the SQL endpoint, it takes me to the SQL endpoint experience where I can actually start creating some T-SQL on top of these 4 files if I like. I can also create a new report. I can do a visual query using Power Query Online Experience. And while I'm in this view, I can actually toggle between the SQL endpoint view and the Lakehouse view. So if I, in the upper right-hand corner, go from SQL endpoint to Lakehouse, then it takes me to the Lakehouse view instead. If you look at the documentation that I linked to you, we are writing that for now, the DirectLake mode is available for Lakehouse. At some point, it will also be available for the SQL endpoint, so you can create it in there. It's in private preview right now. So while I'm in Lakehouse mode here, and I loaded my 4 tables, you'll now see that I have this option to create a new Power BI dataset. So that's what I want to do, new dataset. And I have to select which tables do I want to have in my dataset, and I have these 4, so I will select all 4 of them and click Confirm. So what's happening now is Power BI Fabric is launching this data model editing experience in the browser that we launched a few months ago. And this is today the only way to create a DirectLake dataset. We will also enable this functionality in Power BI Desktop in the future.
But what you're saying is that the DirectLake is not something we can hope to test out in 3 months or 4 months. It's actually there in the service.
This tenant I'm using here is a public tenant. This is not a Microsoft internal only.
So anyone spinning up a trial can actually check out these features today.
You can do this today, now, but wait until we're finished.
Yes, don't leave.
Okay, so this is the experience you see here, this data modeling on the web. And there's a yellow warning here that says that keep in mind all changes will be permanent and automatically saved. That's the experience right now, which is sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I think we've all tried working in a Power BI desktop file and then it suddenly crashes for some reason and maybe you forgot to save it. That's not going to happen here, but if you just do something that you want to redo, then it's already saved. So, but this is again a journey, and we will change this eventually.
Absolutely.
But let's
get quick question. Yeah. Someone's asking, but is copying data into the Lakehouse even necessary? Could we mount a source instead? We saw the happy path of mounting something. Could we mount a source? And would that ruin the purpose of utilizing the DirectLake if we just mount it as a source?
As far as I know, then we will need to load it into the Lakehouse to get it into this V-order compression to make it work.
So we're stuck with kind of a direct query scenario if we're just mounting an external database. I don't even know if you can do that in Microsoft Fabric.
No, I to be honest, I don't know exactly if we can do it. Today, if you want to do DirectLake, then you have to do this.
Yes. Yes.
And
clear
as you saw in the slide, the compression, I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is the magic. Coming back to this model editor here, so I have these 4 tables, and I want to create my relationship. So I have a customer dimension, so I will drag it. If you've worked with this, it's the exact same experience that you have in the data modeling that we launched in Power BI 2 months ago. And for some reason, it's a little slow now. So it is a live demo. So okay.
There's a bit more chat about the copying thing, and I think the way I understand it is that we are copying data to our Lakehouse or to our OneLake.
Yes.
And that's where we want to have it. Then anything here can be shortcutted or virtualized. But we do need to make that copy into our platform to utilize the benefits of the compression and the file format.
That's correct.
So we're unifying on Fabric. It's not that we don't need to ever move data. We need to move it into Fabric, and then we can use it everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and in many cases, when you move data into Fabric, I mean, you need to do some transformation. You need to create your, I'm an older guy, so I've been creating data warehouses many years ago, and we did a lot of ETL to take data from different systems and combine it into an enterprise data warehouse. And and that is what is happening in most organizations anyways. So,
cool.
I mean, I think everyone always have had this, wish of being able to virtualize everything, so you don't have to move data. It works at least on PowerPoint, but I don't think it works in reality, especially not when there are large data volumes and so on. So, so you will need to move or duplicate data once. That's
obviously.
But if you only do it once, then I think it's okay.
Yep. It's loaded up, it seems.
Yeah. So I create this relationship between my fact table and my customer dimension, and let's hope that the next one is a little faster. So my product here. Yeah, I don't know why it was a little slow. Maybe it timed out, and then I do it to my date dimension as well. So I'm not going to create the prettiest data model in here. We don't have time for that. But I want to do one thing. I want to hide all my columns in my fact table, because we should only have measures in our fact table. And then I will create one measure. And notice all this is working in the service. So you could not do this in the service 2 or 3 months ago. So we will call this total sales. And it's going to be a very simple sum of sales amount here. So let's just keep it at that for now. So now I have this data model, which, it looks like a data model that you're creating in Power BI Desktop. The difference is that the files here are accessible in the report, as you'll see in a second, and I only moved them once, that we just discussed. So that's the beauty of it. What I will show you once we have created a report is that there's actually a mechanism of making your new data in your Lakehouse available in your data set. And by default, it will be available immediately, but you can also choose to manually determine when the new file should be available.
All right, so it will automatically include new tables or new columns?
New data in your source.
Data
Yeah,
in
so
your
not
source.
new columns. But,
okay, so
but if you load yesterday's data today, and then tomorrow you're loading today's data.
So you can freeze it to the data right now and don't include new data?
Yeah, I'll show you the settings. So now I created my measure and my fact table, and from in here I can create a new report. So this data set, or one thing I should probably show, is that it has this blue dotted line here. So you can see here, it's not working with Zoom, but you can actually see here that the storage mode is DirectLake. So that is a thing, and it's not something
it's not just something you're saying. No.
So this report here is just an ordinary report. This is my data set. So since I only have a measure here, then my fact table is on top. I add the total sales. It's loading, and then let's just have it as by calendar year. So as I talked about before, I'm loading this into memory as I select the columns. This is not a large data set. If you saw the demos at Build, they are using some of the Microsoft sales data, which is gigabytes of data, and it still works blazing fast. So it works as it's supposed to. So I can save this. I can call it my first DirectLake report. So now we have basically done everything that we talked about. We loaded our data into the Lakehouse from our source. We created our data model using DirectLake, and we created a report on top of that. So that was what I promised, and now you've seen it. It is actually working. You can do this now. So going back to our workspace now. So now we have a data set, and it has this default name. I could change that, of course. And then I have my report. So this report is running on top of the new data set. But if I go into the settings of my data set here, you can also see here I can open this data model here. That was the view we was looking at before. So when I go to the settings, then I will have some data source credentials, and these credentials are not against my Azure SQL database. They are against my my Delta Lake. or Lakehouse.
Lakehouse, yeah.
And then under refresh, we now have a new option here. And that's the top option. So yeah, it doesn't fit in the screen here when I zoom, but this is the one that says keep direct data lake up to date. So when this is turned on by default, then if I have my, in most cases it will be a fact table, when I load new data from my Azure SQL database in this case, then they will be available on the dataset immediately. If I turn this one off, then I will need to invoke, let's say, a refresh on my dataset. But the refresh is just doing something that we are calling a framing, getting the new data that I loaded.
So it's never a full refresh. You just get the new, or something happens in the engine.
So whether it's a full refresh or not depends on how your pipelines are working. So if you like to do a full refresh, then you do that in your pipelines. But I think most organizations will do incremental refresh on their backend as well. So that's the way it's working.
That's really cool.
So you don't need to configure a refresh in here, and all the APIs that works against Power BI Dataset also works here.
So I heard you say the word immediately. So what is immediately? I mean, are we talking minutes? Are we talking seconds?
No,
are we talking sub-seconds?
We don't have time to do that demo now, but it is instantly. So if I go into the report and click refresh once new data is loaded in, I don't have new data in here. But when I click refresh here, once the new data is loaded in, then it will be available.
Okay. Do we know the interval of if you had it to auto update the data? How often would it check for new data? You see, it's a new engine. I don't even know how it works.
No, I don't know the exact details on that. But as we call this transcoding, so it's taking the data from the files into the memory of your data set. So that is what's happening. So there's happening something in the transcoding that moves the data when you need it.
Okay, in a push kind of manner? It arrives and then it knows to push it to the...
No, I think it's more in a pull. So when I open this report, let's say that I have 3 visuals that are querying 5 columns. And my data set has 10 columns. Then it will load these 5 columns into my data set.
Right.
Then if I go to another report page that are using another 2 columns, then it will load those 2 columns.
Right. And so again, the best of direct query in a sense, it notices that the specific visual needs some data, and then it checks for that data in your data lakehouse.
Yes.
Or in one lake.
It loads it into memory. And the eviction part is also very important, so that if you haven't been using it for a while, then we load it out of memory.
Nice.
So right now, everything is done automatically, and there's no configuration, but that's the way it works.
Really nice. Cool. I mean, I'm a bit blown back, to be honest. This is very, very, very promising.
So I mean, I don't have more demo. I don't know if there's more questions, but this is, as you said a number of times, Matthias, this is available today, and I mean, you don't even need to have your own data to play with this. We have a lot of sample data that you can just start using today and get a feel of how it's working. And then eventually when you're ready, then start playing with your own data. And again, we just launched it in public preview, and the recommendation from Microsoft is not to go into production with preview features.
It's a preview.
But again, we want to learn from you who have the actual scenarios. So please play with it, bring us feedback, and that is the way we can improve and make the product better.
Cool. Well, I thought this had been amazing, and I'm much more mind blown about what DirectLake, what meaning DirectLake will have for the Power BI world going forward and could have.
Yeah, it's a new thing since best thing since slide spread, I think.
This is the best thing since
for BI.
The mention of slide spread.
That is, I mean, it is let's be honest, that is the most significant element of Fabric that has been been launched now. We have also talked about Copilot, which will also do a lot of great things for Power BI, but that is not available yet. It will be available initially in private preview for a selected group of customers, and then eventually as public preview. And we also have the Git integration, which of course also is Power BI, which if you saw the session with Christian Wade and Zoe Douglas and Rui Romano, they have a session from Build where they're actually showing how you can use Git integration as your DevOps natively built in.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. So if before this session I thought that Microsoft Fabric was going to be a huge thing, it is. And then we have, for Power BI, we only have a DirectLake. Well, then at least you changed one person's mind here, because to me, this seems like DirectLake will be the revolution of Power BI.
Yeah.
In connection to Microsoft Fabric.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming here and showing these things. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm still having goosebumps and chills and don't know what, but yeah, this was incredible, and I can't wait to see what we will find out in the time going forward around DirectLake and Power BI in general.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And thank you for tuning in. We have the fourth and last session in around 20 minutes at 2 p.m. Central European Time. So tune in and hear more about how we should think and what we should think about for our organization, for capacity and pricing, for collaboration, and all the important things we also should ask ourselves beyond the new gadgets, technologies, amazing technologies. So nice to have you all, and enjoy. See you later.
Bye, guys.